That's the experience of many. So let's admit at the start that the book of Leviticus is not an easy book to study. It can seem a little dry until you understand the meaning and the spiritual reality that underlies these ceremonies and instructions. Exploring the depths of God's truth is never boring and it is never dry. Now, once we begin to understand what these ceremonies and instructions mean and their relevance to our lives today, the book of Leviticus can truly become one of the most fascinating books in the Bible. And reading the book of Leviticus without grasping its underlying reality can be like walking through a busy factory for the first time. A couple of you, maybe, few of you may remember Lyndall Jordan from the other church. He once invited me to come to see him at Caterpillar for a tour of the plant. Now, the first impression for the first-time visitor walking into this huge place gives you the impression of mass confusion. All right, there were machines pounding and clanging, and some shaping metal, some flattening metal. All right, there was no apparent harmony or connection between what one machine did and what the other machine did. I saw people going here and there, moving dollies loaded with parts and sometimes getting in each other's way. But Lyndall took me through the plant. All right, he gave me a guided tour. He took me from place to place, showed me what each machine did, what kind of parts the machine made, and how those parts were assembled. He introduced me to people, told me what they did, and explained how one person's job connected with the work done by another person in the factory. He explained the assembly line that showed me how all the different parts of the operation flowed together. And finally, he took me into the shipping department, where he showed me the completed products, huge earth-moving machinery and tractors. And by the end of the tour, everything that had confused me before now made sense. What seemed like mass chaos and noise, while earlier not only made sense, but was fascinating. And the same is true of the book of Leviticus. If you come to Leviticus without any background, without understanding how each part of the book connects to every other part of the book, part of Leviticus, and to the Bible as a whole, without understanding how each part of the book connects, it will all seem chaotic and meaningless, and even, yes, boring. But if you have a tour guide to Leviticus to help you make sense of it all, then I believe you will discover that it's one of the most important and meaningful books in the entire Bible. You'll see that these ceremonies, sacrifices, and restrictions from an intricately articulated relationships will reveal the plan of God for our lives. See, holiness and wholeness are the key to Leviticus. Holiness and wholeness are the key to Leviticus. And if you want to understand Leviticus, one verse right near the center of the book will help you. And again, it's found in Leviticus 20, verse 26. And ye shall be holy unto me, for I the Lord am holy, and have severed you from other people, that ye should be mine. All right, this is the purpose of the book of Leviticus. God is saying to the people of Israel, He's saying to us as Christians today, ye shall be holy unto me. Why? Because I am the Lord, and I have severed you from the people that ye should be mine. What God said to Israel so long ago, He also says to Christianity today, to Christians today. Now, there are explicit promises made to Israel and Israel alone. All right, the church is not spiritual Israel, as some try to teach. But many of the promises which appear in the picture form in the Old Testament belong also to us who live on this side of the cross. Speaking of Israel's wilderness wandering, Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 10:11, now all these things that happened unto them, the Old Testament wanderers, happened unto them for examples. They are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. See, what God said to Israel so long ago, He also says to Christians today. And we're going to see more of this as we go on. Now look again at the words that God speaks to Israel and to us. Ye shall be holy unto me. Now what does that word holy mean to you? You know, some people associate holiness with strangeness or being peculiar. All right, they think of holy people as being weird or different. And this misconception is fostered by the stereotype of ancient holy men who lived as hermits in the desert, remote from people, maybe a little crazed, possibly even seeing strange visions and talking to themselves. And if this is your image of a holy person, then you probably won't find anything attractive to holiness. In fact, the word might even repel you. For other people, the word holy suggests a sort of grim religiousness. All right, they think of holy people as those who look as if they've been steeped in vinegar or soaked in embalming fluid. And many of us react initially to the word holy as the little girl did who happened to see a mule looking over the fence at her. All right, she'd never seen a mule before, so when this long-faced animal appeared at her, she said to it, "I don't know what you are, but you must be a Christian. You look just like Grandpa." And that's the way many people react to the word holy. They think of holy people as joyless, solemn people who pray all the time, sing grim, gloomy hymns all the time, who never have any fun. The word holy is not attractive to them. And way back when, that was my impression of holy. But after I was saved and began to grow in the Lord, my impression began to change when I read several verses of the Bible that spoke of holiness as a beautiful and glorious thing. 1 Chronicles 16:29. Give unto the Lord the glory due unto his name. Bring an offering, come before him in worship. Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. 2 Chronicles 20:21. And when he had consulted with the people, he appointed singers unto the Lord that should praise the beauty of holiness as they went out before the army, and to say, Praise the Lord, for his mercy endureth forever. Psalm 29:2. Give unto the Lord the glory due unto his name. Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. And then Psalm 96:9. Oh, worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. Fear before him all the earth. And when we read in these verses that holiness is a thing of splendor and beauty, we discover that our mental image of holiness is all wrong. All right, if you want to understand the meaning of this word, then you must go back to its original root. And the word holiness comes from the same Old English word from which we get our word wholeness. The Old English word is hale or haleg, which had many shades of meaning such as wholeness, completeness, health, and even salvation. So when we talk about holiness, we're truly talking about wholeness and completeness. And when God says to us in Leviticus 26, he's telling us that we are to be whole and complete as he is. Now, if you try to read holiness in places, if you try to read wholeness in place of holiness everywhere in the Bible, then you'll be much more closer to what the writers of the book meant. Now, we all know what wholeness is. All right, it is to have it all together, all the parts which are intended to be there, and to have them functioning as they were intended to function. And that's what God's talking about. He says to his people, you shall be whole because I am whole. God's complete. All right? He's perfect. There's no blemish in God. He lives in harmony with himself. He is a beautiful person. He is absolutely what a person ought to be. He is filled with joy and love and peace. He lives in wholeness. And he looks at us in our brokenness and he says to us, you too shall be whole. And the word wholeness has power to awaken a longing within us. All right, we are aware of our brokenness, aren't we? We long to be whole people. I mean, don't you want to be what God made you to be? Wouldn't you want to have every aspect of your personality function in perfect balance. And that's what it means to be a whole and holy person. And that is the beauty and splendor of wholeness and holiness. All right, that is what God is after in our lives. And that's what the book of Leviticus is all about. In fact, it is a theme that runs throughout the entire Bible. All right, we're so aware of our own brokenness, aren't we? Our lack of wholeness. All right, we know how much we hurt ourselves and each other. And we are aware of our inability to cope with life. We know how powerless we are to control bad habits, chronic sins, temptations, and addictions. The things we say and do to hurt others, the ones that we love. All right, we put up a big facade and pretend that we are in control and there's nothing wrong with us. But underneath the facade, we are hurting, full of shame and guilt, and we're running scared. But God in Leviticus tells us that He knows all about our brokenness and pain. He knows that our lives are riddled with sin, shame, and hurt. Our brokenness stands in stark contrast to His holiness. Yet His love reaches out to us, right down to where we are. And He makes a wonderful promise to us. Again, Leviticus 20, verse 26. And ye shall be holy unto me, for I, the Lord, am holy, and have severed you from the other people, that ye should be mine. All right, this is the wonderful plan and purpose that He has for our lives. See, we're separate and set apart. We were created for perfection. And if you read carefully the creation account in Genesis 1, you may notice an interesting detail. At the end of every day of creation, God looks at what He created and He sees that it was good. And then in Genesis 1:27, the creation account undergoes a subtle but important change. Verse 27 of chapter 1. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God created He him. Male and female created He them. And then verse 31. And God saw everything that He had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Did you see that? Not just good, but very good. When Adam was first created, he was perfect and whole. He functioned as God intended humanity to function. He bore the beauty and splendor of the image and the likeness of God. And as human beings, we were lovingly fashioned by God. And He looked upon us and He said that we were very good. But the human race has become misshapen and deformed by sin. And yes, God's image is still stamped upon us, but that image has become marred and damaged. We're no longer whole. You know, if you accidentally drop a quarter into a garbage disposal while it's running, that quarter will get hacked and nicked and maybe even bent. Turn off the disposal and retrieve the quarter, and you'll still be able to tell that it's a quarter. You'll be able to recognize the image of George Washington that's stamped upon it. But that quarter will no longer be what it once was. It will be marred and damaged. And we were made in the image and likeness of God. And we still have His image, but we have lost His likeness. There is a semblance of God, but the completeness and the wholeness of God have been lost. In his poem, Courses from the Rock, T.S. Eliot laments that all our knowledge brings us only closer to our ignorance, and our ignorance brings us closer to death. But closeness to death does not bring us closer to God. And then he asks this question: where is the life we have lost in living? Let me say that again. Where is the life we have lost in living? And isn't that the question so many millions are asking today? Where is the life that I have lost in trying to live? I seek knowledge, but I have no wisdom. I seek pleasure, but I have no joy. I keep chasing happiness, but I have no satisfaction. I seek to make a living, but I have no life. Why don't I know the way out? How come I'm so uptight, so hurting, and so broken? But here in Leviticus, God steps into the brokenness that we have made of our lives, and He promises to make us whole again, just as He is whole. And He knows how to do it. Again, He says in chapter 20, verse 26 of Leviticus, "And ye shall be holy unto me, for I, the Lord, am holy, and have severed you from other people, that ye should be mine." How will God make us holy? Through a process of separation. And the reason we're so broken is that we are involved in a broken race. All right, we've been infected by a broken, sin-riddled world. Our attitudes are wrong. Our views of life are twisted and distorted. We make illusions for truth, or we mistake illusions for truth, and then we act upon them. All right, we're chasing phantoms and fantasies and delusions. So God must separate us. All right, He has to break us loose from the conformity and the thought patterns and the attitudes and reactions of those around us. He has to deliver us from all of that, straighten out our thinking, set our minds and our hearts right, and untangle our fouled relationships. But God will not make us whole against our will. If we choose to remain broken, guess what? He'll allow it. All right? It is a process that takes infinite patience and love because it's voluntary. God never forces us into it. Some will choose to become whole and holy, and some will not. And God will deliver only those who trust Him enough to respond to His love. Well, what about Christ before the cross? Many years ago, at my father-in-law's house, there was a squirrel named Charlie. Remember that? Yeah, remember that? Casey, remember Charlie? All right, this squirrel would actually take food out of your hand and even crawl on you. It was amazing. But you had to be still. You couldn't make any sudden moves or he wouldn't come to you. Even if he wanted what you were giving him, he still had a fear of us as humans. All right, he was still a wild animal and very much afraid. And it took a while for Charlie to trust that we wouldn't hurt him or capture him or do anything else to him. And it took patience on my father-in-law Bob's part at the start for Charlie to get to that point. And that's a good picture of what God deals with us in reaching out toward man. He takes infinite patience. It takes infinite patience and love on His part to reach out to a fearful, hurting world. Fearful and hurting men and women just like us. And that's why God gave us His book. He starts in kindergarten with us. He starts with pictures and shadows and visual aids in order to show us what He's going to do someday. All the ceremonies and offerings of the Old Testament are shadows and pictures of Jesus Christ. And when we understand the meaning of these ceremonies and these offerings, it becomes clear that Christ is pictured here in the book of Leviticus. God shows us through His people Israel His way of healing human hurt, guilt, and pain. All right, that's God's way to wholeness. Well, some might say, I thought Jesus Christ was the way to wholeness. Well, that's exactly true. He is. But Jesus is not just the way to wholeness only for those who believed in Him after the cross. For thousands of years before Jesus died and rose again, men and women were hurting and broken just like we are. And they needed Christ also, and He was available to them centuries before He came to this earth in human form. How? Through the pictures and symbols of these ceremonies in Leviticus. So when people grasp the reality behind these pictures, when they lay hold of Jesus through faith in the one who would someday come to save them, they came to the same joy and peace that we have as Christians. When they saw what was going on, they looked forward to Christ. And we see this picture principle clearly as we read the Psalms. And there we see how much David understood of the presence and grace of God in his life. Now, some of the Psalms give us a picture of the divine nature of the coming Messiah. Psalm 2, verse 7. I will declare the decree the Lord has said unto me, Thou art my son. This day I have begotten thee. Other psalms speak of the Messiah's humanity, such as Psalm 8, verses 4 through 6. What is man that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man that thou visitest him? For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and hast crowned him with glory and honor. Thou madest him to have dominion over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things under his feet. Other messianic passages in the Psalms include Psalm 110, verses 1 and 2, which Jesus quoted as proof of his authority. The Lord said unto my Lord, Sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool. The Lord shall send the rod of thy strength out of Zion. Rule thou in the midst of thine enemies. And then in Matthew 22, verses 43 and 44, he saith unto them, How then doth David in spirit call him Lord, saying, The Lord hath said unto me, unto my Lord, Sit thou on my right hand till I make thine enemies thy footstool. Psalm 110:4 speaks of Christ's atoning and priestly role. Psalm 42:9 speaks of his betrayal. Psalm 118:22, verse 23 speaks of Christ being rejected by the people. Psalm 22 speaks of his suffering and death. Psalm 16, verses 8 through 10 speaks of his resurrection. And David was a man whose hurt and guilt had been healed by God. And he came to understand that God was his strength in his very life, and that God could meet every need of his heart and work out all the tangible relationships in his family and in his personal life. And he reflects all of these in the Psalms that he wrote. Like the Psalm in which were written centuries before the birth of Christ, Leviticus is filled with pictures of Christ. All the sacrifices, the rituals, the ceremonies of Leviticus are pictures of Jesus Christ and his work, and how he is available to men and women even then. And from this side of the cross, we can clearly see Jesus in the pages of Leviticus. So Leviticus is not just a historical book. It's not just a catalog of religious rules and regulations. It wasn't written just for the people of Israel. It is a tremendously practical and relevant manual on how we are to live as Christians. But there's even more. When you read the book of Leviticus and understand what it's saying, it will help you to understand yourself. It will reveal to you the person that you truly are and the person God created you to be. All right, we're a mystery to ourselves, aren't we? We don't even understand really how we think. We're confused by our own experience. We're driven by motives and urges that we don't even understand, much less control. Don't you feel that way at times? Certainly do. Remember the way Paul expressed this in Romans 7:19? For the good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do. All right, this is a picture of life. It is a very penetrating, probing analysis of what's going on in your life and mine. And in the same way, the book of Leviticus shows us why we do the things that we do. It's designed to meet us where we are, in our sinfulness, our helplessness, and our hurt. And as we learn to accept the healing grace that God offers, Leviticus will reveal to us the beauty and the splendor of wholeness that can be ours. In Jesus Christ, God took upon himself the form of man. Jesus came to this earth, God in flesh, and dwelt among us as men. God as man, and man as God intended him to be. All right, he came to be where we are. All right, he came to where we are. And everything that he was and did as a man is what we can also be and do. So, as you study this book, you not only discover Christ, but you also discover yourself. And you learn what your deepest needs truly are and how God has met those needs in Jesus Christ. I think I still got a ways to go, so I think I'm going to stop there before I give us an overview. I think next time I'll give us an overview of Leviticus. But just for tonight, we're going to go ahead and stop there. But Leviticus is going to be an exciting book to study. And I hope you're excited about it because you're going to learn a lot. It's not going to be boring. It's not going to be, I promise you, I will make it practical. And it will help us all in our life with Christ. It will help us to live as God wants us to live. It's going to be a great study. Let's pray.